Okay, good morning. It is 7:30 on Friday morning. I hope you guys are doing great on your first midterm. Unfortunately, we did not have enough time to get through our review packet because of the snow days, so here is a quick 10-minute synopsis about some terms that we did not get to go over in class. I hope you use this to fill in your review packet and that you are productive in terms of reviewing for your test. Remember to reach out to me on Remind or via email, or stop in between now and Tuesday at 11:30 if you have any questions. Ninth period. So we're going to start here with our Jackson America topics. We got through we got through all the first 33. We got through most of the westward expansion. Let's kind of fly through these, and we'll clean up a couple of things and go from there. The whole Jackson story starts weirdly with the election of 1824, which is your term here, number 34, largely because he lost an election that he got the most votes in. We call this the corrupt bargain election. Jackson ran for president against a lot of people: John Quincy Adams, Henry Clay, William Crawford, and Jackson got the most electoral votes and the most popular votes, but he did not get the majority of electoral votes, which costs him the election because it is officially considered a tie, and the House of Representatives picks John Quincy Adams to be president instead of Jackson. And Jackson and his followers believed that some kind of shady deal was done between Clay and John Quincy Adams, hence why we call the election of 1824 a corrupt bargain. However, Jackson does get his revenge. He wins the election of 1828, beating John Quincy Adams. And when he becomes president, he enters into a very interesting time in our country's history. Number 35 talks about the thing called the spoils system, also known as patronage, where a president would reward the people that supported him along the way with a job or position or some semblance of power in the government, and it becomes infamously known as the spoils system. And Jackson, what's worth noting for you guys is that he was a huge promoter of the spoils system. He loved the spoils system. He utilized the spoils system. He used the spoils system in a lot of different ways. And he was really the first president that really promoted this on a full-scale basis. But then as we get into Andrew Jackson's presidency, he's really known for three major events that took place all in his time as president. I'm going to jump around here a little bit. I apologize if it screws you up a little bit. But the first thing we talked about was the nullification crisis that revolved around tariffs. Remember, tariffs, if you don't know it, make sure you write it down, are taxes on imported goods. And unfortunately, Southerners didn't really like these tariff rates because they felt that they were unfair to the South, that they largely only benefited Northern businesses, because as we increased tariff rates on other countries to make American businesses' products cheaper, then other countries are going to increase tariff rates on us. And Southerners really felt that that was unfair. South Carolina especially nullified this tax law and said, we're not doing it. We're not going to follow the tariff. And if you don't like it, we might secede. And number 40 says, explain Jackson's handling of it. Well, Andrew Jackson, being a little bit of a different bird, said, you know what? Might go to war with you over this. And Andrew Jackson said, I'm going to use military force to collect these tariffs. And it turned into an escalation of possible violence. Fortunately, Henry Clay came along and helped to settle the deal, but it was a pretty tumultuous year or so in the United States as South Carolina and Andrew Jackson were having this stare-down contest about, what to do. It made it pretty clear that Jackson was willing to do things that not everybody who had been president before him were willing to do. If you jump up to number 37 and 38, we also were involved during Jackson's time period with the Indian crisis, specifically the Indian Removal Act, where we talked about these 5 civilized tribes: the Cherokee, the Creek, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Seminole. These tribes were living largely in the southeastern part of the country. That's worth writing down, the southeastern part of the country. And Jackson was really hearing from people in these southern states that wanted the land that the Indians were on. So he passes this thing called the Indian Removal Act, which allowed these southern states to move by force these natives to western land, which was largely done to please Southern citizens, Southern whites. When you move on to 38 here, it says, why did Jackson want to remove the Indians? If you remember, we did a stations activity, and in one of those stations activity, Jackson said that, well, we're not doing this for our benefit. We're doing this for your benefit, Native American tribes. We want to help you because these states are going to steal your land anyway. So we're going to give you more land than you ever had, just somewhere else in the country. It was a lie. It was largely done to promote expansion in that land for white citizens, but that's what Jackson said to get away with it. Number 36, how did Andrew Jackson destroy the National Bank of the United States? If you remember, we talked about this briefly in the Jackson unit, towards the end of the unit. Andrew Jackson did not like the National Bank. He felt that it was way too powerful. It gave way too much authority to Northerners and wealthy people. And when he became president, there was a bill passed that the Congress wanted to extend the bank. They wanted to make the bank last longer. And Jackson vetoed the bank bill. He literally said, no, I'm not following it. I'm shutting her down. And when he did that, it was the first time a president vetoed a bill, not because he thought it was like unconstitutional, but he thought it was just wrong. Jackson didn't think the bank was unconstitutional. He thought the bank was just dumb. And then as soon as that happened, he just stopped using the bank, which was also something that a president wasn't supposed to do. He just started bleeding the bank dry by not moving money into the bank as presidents have done before him. So, Jackson vetoes the bill to destroy the bank, and then he destroys the bank by just not using it anymore. Just really weird. And because of all these things put together, there was a lot of opposition to Andrew Jackson. And one of the big nicknames that he got was King Andrew I. And, it's definitely worth writing down that he got this nickname not as a term of endearment. This was not supposed to be a compliment. If you were called a king back then, it was a smack in the face. And it was a reference from his opposers that he abused his power, that he was doing too much as president. He was doing things that no president had done before. And then number 41 is our last term here. Why did the Whig Party form? Well, it was made up of people who just hated Andrew Jackson. The Whig Party formed largely as a result of anybody who had a stance that Jackson didn't support. You joined the Whig Party. The one thing that was cohesive for these people that joined the Whig Party was that they did not like Andrew Jackson, and that was about it. Andrew Jackson was somebody who was a very divisive, controversial figure. You could argue that he got a lot done, but you could also argue that he did things in a way that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way moving forward. And the Whig Party was really the culmination of that group of people who wanted to stand against Jackson in those ways. So there's our Jackson comments. That took 7.5 minutes. Awesome. There was a couple of things that we did not get to down here at the end of our Manifest Destiny conversation. The one that I really want to focus in on here, what were the effects of the Mexican War? So as we said yesterday, right at the end of the period, when we explained the significance of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Mexico gave us this land called the Mexican Cession. Hopefully you took a picture of the map activity that I said could be on the test. We, in return, gave Mexico $15 million for that. So now the question becomes, well, what are the effects of the Mexican War? And the first one is really cool. We got bigger. Our land expanded, and we're fulfilling Manifest Destiny, and good things are happening there. But the two drawbacks I would say to the Mexican War, which are definitely worth writing down for number 47. Number one, we increased divisiveness and tension with Mexico. Mexico wasn't thrilled about how this war worked out. They thought the war was about Texas. It was about much more than Texas. We wanted California. We wanted this land for Manifest Destiny reasons, and we got it. Mexico and the United States' relationship definitely took a hit. And then the other big thing is what takes us into the causes of the Civil War unit, which is the last two units of your review packet, which is where you want to turn to the activity that is up on our Google Classroom that I gave to you guys yesterday, and it's been up there, and the answer key is there as well, which is really clearly, once again, write this down for number 47. Now that we have all this land, the big question is not just celebrating the land, but the big question now becomes, what do you do with that land? Does this land become free? Does this land become slave? And all of a sudden, the big conversation now becomes what happens next. And that's what starts to lead in and bleed into the next unit, which is your causes of the Civil War unit and your Civil War unit, which once again, we made a handout for all of these terms and topics that you can use to match the term on the top with the description on the questions list, and then you can take that and fill in all of this information on your review packet. The last one here is number 48, explain the impact of the gold rush. The gold rush was huge for our country, largely in Northern California in 1848 and 1849. I think two other things worth writing down here is that, well, actually three things. Number one, it helped to expand our country and fulfill manifest destiny, a new opportunity for people to move west. Number two, it definitely added to our economy. I think the number from the book was $350 million of money, of gold that we found in the gold rush that we can support our economy with. And another thing that's pretty cool is that a lot of people from around the world also came to the United States because of the gold rush. It wasn't just an American thing, but a lot of Chinese and Japanese immigrants came over. It really led to California becoming a very diverse place. So I think the idea of like racial, ethnic diversity should be written down for number 48 as well. But like I said, that is basically it. If you use the review sheet for the last two sections, I think you'll be in good shape. I do want to highlight number 64, however. This number under our Civil War unit was not part of the review activity that I made for you guys in reference to the causes of the Civil War and the Civil War unit. So let's just talk about this for 1 minute. The question is compare and contrast the economy, politics, military, and society of the North and South heading into the Civil War. Boy, this sounds like an essay question. Does it sound like an essay question? I think it sounds like an essay question. But if you think about number 64, we know that going into this war, everybody thinks the Union's going to win the war, and we think it's not going to be close. I mean, write down some of this stuff. The Union had 2.5 times more people. The Union had 3 times more railroads. The Union had more telegraph lines. The Union had 5 times more factories. They had 5 times more money. They had more men. They had more supplies. They had more guns. They had an established army. They had an established navy, one of the best navies in the world. They had an established government with a president and leadership and power that they kind of knew what to do. In retrospect, the Confederacy didn't have any of that stuff. They had less people, less weapons, less factories, less money. They didn't have alliances. They had to build all that stuff from scratch. They didn't have an established government. They didn't have an army. They had no navy. The two things that the Confederacy did have going for them going into this war is, one, they had more trained military officers. Most of our leadership in our army were from southern states. And when the Confederacy became the Confederacy, those people went with their states. And the other thing, we've talked about this a lot, is that the Confederacy could play a defensive war. Going down to number 65, the Confederacy wanted to play a defensive war. They wanted to make the Union attack them, trying to wear them down to get the Union to give up. And that was going to be a major benefit going into a war, because it's much easier to play defense than it is to play offense. So once again, I hope this was helpful. I hope you use the review activity to fill in all of this information from number 49 through number 69. I wish you the best of luck studying, and please reach out if you have any questions.